We are live tonight with School Psych Podcast. My name is Rachel. I'm a school psychologist currently working in the state of Maryland, and we're just very excited to be talking a little bit about supervision tonight. We have two very experienced supervisors who are going to give us kind of the supervisor side. We've talked a little bit about the internship, so we get the flip side of the coin here tonight. Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm a school psychologist in Connecticut. I want to encourage you guys to participate tonight, so I'm going to explain a little bit how, because I think sometimes people don't know how to make comments and want to while they're watching. So if you log on to Facebook, you can go, we have two different pages. We have School Psyched, your school psychologist. You can just comment under the top post, which is a reminder about this episode. You can also send a message to that page if you don't want other people to see it for any reason, or you can post to page, which is a visitor post, and you can do the same on the School Psyched podcast page. Also on Twitter, please comment just by tweeting out using the hashtag psychedpodcast. So I'll be looking during the broadcast for your questions, comments, experiences, anything you'd like to share. We'd love to hear from you tonight. Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a school psychologist working in New York State. So we're talking about supervision tonight. That's our topic. And when I first heard about it, I was thinking like, oh, supervision, you know, my boss, my supervisor, right? But we're talking about much more than that. We have some different research stats that we've gotten from different sources. The first one is the most common type of of supervision is administrative supervision. That's from Curtis, Castillo, and Gelly in 2012. There was another survey that was completed with school psychs, and they found that only 23% of school psychs had access to individual or group supervision, while 95% of early career school psychs felt that they should have it. So a lot less people are getting direct supervision regularly than feel that they should have it. So that's interesting. And less than a third of school psychs receive an hour or more of weekly supervision early in their career. So supervision, when you're starting out, you know, when we're an intern, you have your supervisor that has to spend time with you. But when you're in your first year in the field, you're on your own a lot of the time, and that's an issue. So we have two wonderful guests who are here to talk about it and give us some ideas.
Yeah. So first I'd like to introduce our friend Eric. Eric has been a friend of our Facebook pages for a long time, and so I personally have adopted him as my unofficial supervisor because he always shares great ideas. He's just so kind and has such wonderful experience as a supervisor and a school psychologist. Eric is a certified school psychologist working in Connecticut. He's in his 25th year in the field. He has 2 articles published in the Connecticut School Psychologist regarding addressing social behavioral needs. He has co-authored his building's RTI manual, which is now being adopted in his district. So he's got a lot to share tonight, and we're looking forward to asking questions and hearing from Eric. So should we just hear from Eric? Eric, please join us and tell us about yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here, and I always appreciate what I gain from the podcast and from the Facebook pages. So I learn a lot from everyone. So I'm happy to be here and happy to share. So it's my 25th year as a school psychologist, but I haven't been taking interns for a very long time. So it's a relatively newish experience for me. So I'm happy to be able to support and talk about that. And along with that, I've been on 2 state committees that have written the guidelines. We're currently writing the guidelines for school psych professional practice and have previously written the rubric for measuring service providers in Connecticut as well. So it kind of relates to what we're doing as supervisors, having some idea or handle on the practice in itself. So, interestingly, the NASP has just published our. I'll hold it up here. We can find it on NASP webpage. The NASP practice model implementation guide for school psychology. So. You can find that on NASP, and that's brand new. It's a pretty comprehensive document. I have not read it in its entirety, but it should be guiding us and our supervisors and our districts in terms of furthering the field, models to pay attention to as far as domains of professional practice, those sorts of things. So
very cool. I'm going to jump in and introduce our second guest, just so he doesn't feel left out and we can get his comments too, as we're also talking with Eric. It's going to be one big discussion with the 5 of us tonight. So we have Carlo Cuccaro, who has worked for 23 years as a school psychologist in New York, 21 as an adjunct professor at the State University of New York in Oswego. They're very cold and snowy up there right now. That's what I'm hearing. Previously awarded the School Psychologist of the Year in New York, and he's supervised multiple graduate and practicum interns. So lots of good information here tonight, but welcome.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here. Like Eric was saying, kind of excited about participating in the whole issue of supervision, and I would even say in a larger sense, kind of collaboration among school psychologists is really a difficult thing to realize. We tend to function in silos, and there's a lot of independence out there. Autonomy is great, but it gets a little lonely sometimes. So finding people to consult with and talk over cases and hone practices and look at new things that are out there can be very tricky. Thankfully, folks like you using social media have helped to bring that to be a little more available. But in terms of day-to-day stuff, I still have this ongoing concern about how kind of we're all lone wolves out there doing our own thing.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's very lonely out there, and I think especially if I can speak for the early career people, it's scary too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you finish grad school, you finish internship, it doesn't mean you know everything,
Really?
And then you have your own building or your own district. Some people have their own district, and that's it, and that's scary stuff.
Yeah.
So I think we'll jump right into.
I'm sorry, this is Carlo again. I'd like to at some point kind of dovetail this from not only supervision of interns, but how do you hone your practices and collaborate with others and get some level of supervision, because the unfortunate reality is for a lot of us, we're doing our own thing, and building competence takes supervision and guidance, and at whatever age. I've been doing this 23 years, and when the new DAS comes out, I'll be kind of the only person trying to figure it out, and it would certainly be nice to have somebody to work along with. I don't anticipate that happening, but that collaboration would be nice. I wish I saw more of it.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, I had that experience recently with the Dallas Kaplan test for executive. It's tough. It's tough to score. It's tough to learn, and when you're not in school with a professor guiding you, it's even tougher. So I found supervision though in the NASP community boards.
Oh, sweet. Good for you.
Yeah, but that's one way to do it. But yeah, so how do you guys? How have your experiences been? Supervising interns and also mentoring early career or mid-career other school psychologists. Is there a difference in how you go about it, or do you have a sort of a protocol that you like to follow, or is it more as need? Yeah.
For me, and this is almost I say like kind of a bias. For interns, I really try to make it somewhat of a protected experience, and I don't mean that to sound condescending, but there's so much that you need to know, and unfortunately so little that you really know coming out, that I want to try to let them hone certain skills, like in terms of assessments. So my kind of guiding principle initially is if I have interns, I'm not going to give them the ED kid who's going to throw chairs, drop F-bombs, and flee the room for their first evaluation. And I'm also not going to ask them to do the Dallas Kaplan, and all these different assessments they may or may not have experience with. So one of the fortunate situations for me, and it's more by design of the building, is where my practicum students and interns are situated is in a guidance suite, in a conference room outside of my office.
Oh,
So they're, for better and for worse, constantly within earshot of me. And I think that's important because I think there's so many things that you have questions about. Having someone available to ask those questions, I think, becomes very important. So the two big things for me, one is having frequent access to the intern to talk things over and answer questions and provide guidance. The other is more just a principle of how it's structured, and that is try to make that the experience a gradual experience, one increasing in difficulty of cases, complexity, intensity, and try to walk them through every step. So making sure that before they present at a committee on special education, they're doing a mock presentation with me.
So you're not a trial by fire type of guy.
Oh, no. I still have a vivid memory 25 years ago of going to see my CSE chair, who had a reputation for literally making people cry. And my internship supervisor said, "You are going to go present to so-and-so." And I had known this person would make people on a regular basis cry. And my internship supervisor sat down with me and went over everything together, and I felt very prepared. And I still remember that, making sure it's kind of a gradual sort of experience. And the reality is you shouldn't be winging it. Now, having said that, I know some internship circumstances that are more quasi-jobs, and I do worry about that when you're expected to come in, hit the ground running, and function as a school psychologist. That's when bad habits develop and get entrenched. Not to mention you probably scare some people off from the field.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Eric, do you feel the same way, kind of the gradual exposure?
I do. I have been fortunate enough to have my interns also as my practicum students, so they've started out a little bit slower, less time in the building, and more structure to the requirements that they have to do. So my practicum students can only do triennial testing, and I definitely am careful about not giving them that tough kid. And we have a district that tends to, we're busy probably like anywhere, so we might get a call that would say, hey, we're backed up with triennials, can your practicum or interns students come and do some of these? And they appreciate the experience, but I'm also very careful to say, why would you give them that case, or please be careful, or those kinds of things. So I agree that bad habits getting entrenched is a real important thing, and that's really, I think, a key to what supervision is about. I certainly, hopefully, if any of my former students or current students are listening, will agree. I certainly hope that they don't think I come with all the answers. And there are times where we look things up together, or check with your professors on that, and let me know what they think, and sort of sharing in some of the new knowledge base, especially. The students come to me with having freshly learned all their tests and all the new research, so I learn things from them as well. So there's a little give and take.
So I'm going to one of our first questions here. We have a series of questions targeted for Eric. And Eric, I wanted to hear about different domains of supervision and different the goal of supervision. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience with that?
Sure. So probably like any university, my students come with a rubric of things that they're supposed to be measured by, how I review their practice each semester, and that usually coincides with our state guidelines. It coincides with the NASP guidelines, but it's pretty consistent with our state guidelines as well. And we have a number of domains of professional practice that are covered within that, and things like appropriate use of data, being culturally aware, skills as far as being able to relate to the students, being aware of social and emotional concerns, those kinds of things. So in the NASP practice manual, our practice guidelines, as well as our state guidelines, there are, I think it's about 9 domains of practice, and then each of those is, for the students, each of those has a little rubric how they're measured. But what I do within those guidelines is I make a list of things that I hope that I will teach the students, or at least we'll learn together. So with appropriate use of data, for example, I want my students to develop an understanding of the RTI process and how they can take data, even from everything from quantifying an observation to developmental histories, and on up to testing and measuring a student's progress through counseling goals, those kinds of things. So we really talk about what kinds of data we're looking at, review of records, extant data, not just quantifiable things, but things that are just qualitative as well. So that's a big one for me, because we really need to use data in everything we're doing, and it drives our decision making. Everything from qualifying kids to how we're progressing and how we're measuring their counseling progress as well.
I'm wondering, I have a question for both of you, or either of you, and maybe this would go sort of by your area of the country, but do you find that your supervisees have any sort of general areas of weakness, or areas where they're more unsure, uncertain than other areas? For example, maybe they're more afraid of counseling than the assessment piece, or more comfortable presenting to faculty than to talking to parents?
I think in general, this is Carlo again, many of my students, I wouldn't say it's a weakness as much as just a lack of confidence. So they're coming in not sure what to expect. They had a 1-day-a-week experience for a practicum, and now they're going to be there full time. And really realizing, I think, ultimately that they don't know all the answers, and that people are going to be looking to them for answers. And so there's a lot of confidence building, I think, that needs to go on. Now, having said that, I don't personally. I always probably had more confidence than I should have. So a certain level of arrogance that I came in, and at the risk of sounding flippant, I think that's important. I think it really is important that you, if you don't know, it's okay, but don't act like you don't know.
I like it.
You have to be careful, because you don't want to go rogue on that and start pretending you know everything. But I do worry about early career psychologists who are very kind of passive and not sure of their conclusions, and worried about making the wrong impression, and it's just this kind of passivity for a lot of early career folks that I think makes people not have as much confidence in them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's such good advice, and I hope people out there are taking that to heart. I also think sometimes you can be unsure and confident at the same time, because you can kind of phrase it as, this is not, the end-all, be-all, explanation for this, but what I have found based on the data that I've collected, here's what I think, or something like that. So it sounds confident, but you're still not sure. Right?
That's a great point. People look to us to make decisions. Families, especially, when we're presenting at an IEP meeting, they're expecting that we've tested their child or we've worked with their child. What can you tell us about our child? So, yeah, having a level of confidence, and teachers too, especially when you come in fresh and you're young, maybe. Teachers are looking to us to be leaders and to have some answers, especially for kids with behavior needs. So having a level of confidence and some expertise at least, but being able to look that up and being able to say with confidence, you know what, I'm not sure, but let's find out, but yeah, having a too timid an approach, we're probably in the field where we get eaten alive if we're not confident. So
the other thing I would add is I think as the field has evolved, many interns come in with interests across a range of areas, and while that's terrific, I think sometimes we have to be careful that we're not master, what is it?
Jack of all trades.
Jack of all trades, master of none. Thank you. And so people who want to, have an interest in we have a university that has a kind of a high emphasis in play therapy, and they want to do play therapy, and then they want to do consultation, and they want to do assessments, and they want to do intervention team, they want to do FBAs, and you can't do it all well, so you do a lot of it poorly. And I think particularly for early career folks, I would choose one or two areas and learn the crap out of it. I worry about the lack of mastery and understanding of the psychometrics behind tests. And so I think there's a superficiality sometimes when you try to do too many things. And so what I try to force my interns to do is to focus on some really important areas, and others you may have to put off to the side. It may be an interest of yours to do counseling, and I'm a huge fan of counseling, but that may not be the thing, practically speaking, that you're going to do a lot of in some settings. And so let's make sure your assessment skills are tight. Let's make sure that your consultation skills are tight. And then other areas, hopefully you'll be doing this for 30 years. You can develop those.
Yeah. That's a great point, and that hopefully is where supervision can come in play, with our colleagues or our direct district supervisor, looking at where our time is needed initially. Probably for most of us it's with assessments, psychoed assessments, and I would imagine behavior plans and classroom supports next. So that's a great point, and we can hone those skills over time. But trying to do it all out of the gate, and sometimes we're expected to know so much about so many things. So being careful about that is a really good point.
Speaking of time, there was a question that we had for you, Eric, about the pros and cons about taking on a student. I've taken on 2 practicum students, and in my experience with that was it took a lot more time out of my day-to-day duties.
Sure.
So what did you notice with taking on interns or practicum students with time?
That's a good question, and I hesitated to do it for quite a while in my career, and part of that was something that I probably call like the myth of autonomy. There's so many pieces to running through my building, assessments, counseling, and in my case, probably like most of us, I'm on the move a lot. And so I had this thought that taking on a practicum student or an intern, I might have to be spoon-feeding somebody and having them shadow me at times where it might be a little bit of a burden on what I'm doing in the building. And my experience has been I've found it just to be the opposite of that. The students that I've had have been eager, bright, able to get right involved at the level they were capable. And also honest with me in terms of, I'm comfortable with that or I'm not comfortable, or before I do that I might need this kind of support. And so we've had a really open relationship, my students and I. And like Carlo, my students are in my office. So when somebody has to test, if I'm not observing them testing, we find room to do something somewhere else in the building. But otherwise, we're sharing the same space, so there's a lot of shadowing and give and take, discussion about things. But I found my students to be very eager to really jump right in and learn. And the thing that I would expect from students really is a sense of compassion and open-mindedness, commitment to the students. And beyond that, if they can read a test manual, they can give a test. So we'll work on interpretation and report writing, those kinds of things. But if they have the personal skills and the drive to work with kids and compassion for the families, that's the stuff I can't show them and teach them. So I've been very fortunate.
That's great. How do you guys both find your interns and supervisees? Are they assigned to you by local master's programs, or do you advertise? Do you sort of send out employment advertisements? How do you do that?
Well, for practicum students, because I'm close to the local university, State University at Oswego, and I have a relationship with lots of the professors there, I regularly get calls every year for practicum students. Internships are a little more involved because you end up talking about having to go through personnel, get approval in the budget, get postings, those sorts of things. So practicum students are relatively easy to, easy might be the wrong word, but readily available to some of us, and the behind-the-scenes work is insignificant in terms of securing one. I usually get an email, who wants a practicum student? I'll say I do, and then I'll get an email from the student, and we'll set up a schedule to have that student come in and talk about what their responsibilities will be. Now, when we talk about interns, we just, the local university has an internship fair every year in December, and that is a kind of a place where all of the local districts go with their either personnel director, director of special education, or whomever is kind of in charge of the internship situation, and the students from this university are at the internship fair. So a little bit like a job fair where students will go around to each of the respective schools and talk. This year there is a relatively small class of interns at the local university, so I have excuse me, have reached out to several other universities in probably a 100-mile radius and talked to internship coordinators, university professors. So we have a posting that our personnel director drew up. I sent that out. I put it on the NASP listserv as well. So trying to get some candidates to come on down to scenic Fulton, New York.
That's great. And did you mention you might be looking for interns currently as well?
Yeah, well, for the upcoming school year.
For the upcoming school year.
Yes.
Good to know, everybody.
Yeah, that's important. And I think our field is slightly different than maybe clinical, where you have to be matched for your internship, and there's a lot of competition. I don't know, at least where I am, we have a relationship with Southern Connecticut State University, and I know Fairfield University in Connecticut, UConn, and University of Hartford all have school psych programs. And at least in my case, what some of the professors have done is just reached out to our district, and we have 17 psychologists in district, so as many as are able certainly could take interns. I know not everybody's tenured yet. We have some new folks, and I don't think they're able to take interns until they're tenured. But so we're certainly open to accepting practicum students and interns, and we welcome the universities calling us. We're happy to do it. And someone had mentioned paid internships. We don't have paid internships in Connecticut, but we currently right now have a shortage of school psychologists, and the state allows students to be hired during their intern year if they finish their master's and are completing their 6-year certification, but are all but internship complete. They're allowed to be hired under the guise that they're completing their internship. So they actually are hired as school psychologists during the intern year, which is interesting. I don't know whether that'll change when we don't have a shortage. We call it DSAP. I'm not quite sure what the initials stand for, but that's what the state calls it, I guess.
Oh, that sounds great. I didn't know that, but sounds like a nice security.
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, I think as Carlo mentioned, there's the possibility that bad habits get formed if there isn't close supervision, but I think the expectation is that very close supervision is taking place at that level as well.
Mm-hmm. Just to I lost my train of thought. Just to kind of impose in there, we have kind of a comment on Anna. Your cat got a shout out, and I think that was funny. So.
She abandoned me now. She was sitting on my questions, so I was trying to like get to them, and she was not appreciating it. So she's taking her moment in the spotlight, and she's ran.
Sorry to derail us, but I just, oh, I have kind of a question too. So my intern year, I had 2 supervisors, which was nice because I got to see how things were working over at these schools and how this person does it over here. Do you guys ever do that? Do you think that that's good? Do you think that that can be confusing? What are your thoughts on multiple supervisors for one intern?
I know one of my students, I'm in an elementary school, and well, actually 2 of my students in particular had wanted secondary experience. So I was more than happy for them to get whatever experience they needed. So we made arrangements for them to do some counseling at the high school level and do some assessments across our district. And so in those instances, they did get some supervision from the other psychologists, and I certainly trust. I don't feel any ownership. I do feel my students are sort of my protective of them in some respects, but in terms of sharing the supervisory support, I trust the other psychologists in my district to give them the same kind of support that they need as well.
And same as Eric, the internship experience, I'm assuming this is cross states, is K-12. And so I'm an elementary K-6 building, so when my interns go up to either junior high or the high school, they'll be interacting with the psychologists in the respective buildings. The amount of interaction might not be quite to the same level as they have with me, but they'll have a chance to get feedback and collaborate with others as well, which I think is important. Because, as I said earlier, when you're an intern, you are working directly with a school psychologist on a regular basis. That won't happen again.
Right.
Once you get out in the field, you will. I see my colleagues maybe once a month at psychologist meetings, and we haven't had a psychology meeting this year because there's this weird contractual thing going on now where meetings outside of the school day have I don't know if they've been people have been arguing about them or whatever, but we've had almost no school psychologist meetings. So once again, once you're out of that internship experience, your regular interactions with others in the field is going to be somewhat limited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that point because during my internship year, I had 2 regular supervisors. I had 2 days in one building and 3 days in another. And then I also spent some time with a district psychologist that was in charge of private schools. So she helped me navigate those assessments and reports. So I thought it was great to see different styles of psychologists because everybody's report is a little bit different, the things that they focus on. I found it really helpful. And those 3 supervisors were so different from my college professors. So I really like that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Even if you have a terrible one, you have some chances to learn how you would not be a supervisor if you become one day. Right?
That's right.
So, Eric, I hear you do research and have some special RTI experience.
I do. Connecticut adopted RTI a few years back, and we call it SRBI in Connecticut, Scientific Research-Based Interventions. And at the building level, we really felt like my vice principal and I and some other staff felt like we needed to get a better handle on it. So we needed to have some ownership into the process and shift the paradigm from what we had been previously doing. So my VP and special ed teacher did a needs assessment on the building in terms of what we understood as RTI and what support we need. And then the following year, my vice principal and I just sort of tackled the project. It took us about a year of writing, but we wrote a process manual and researched other RTI states and other RTI districts, and came up with what we believe is a pretty good model. We rolled it out to our building, and the district liked it, and so now it's the model for the district. So we think we did something good with it, at least. But I'm one of those folks who gets bored easily, so I do a lot of reading and writing on my own. So it's just one of those, the family goes to bed and I have to do something for a little while more just to keep the brain active, I guess. So, but we did also rolled out an action team for doing FBAs, so that it wasn't just sitting on my shoulders, that whole process, which, for some of us it's the psych who does all of that. So I did the same thing. I researched, what a good FBA should be, and wrote a procedural manual. And my principal liked it, so we've adopted this team of it's about 8 of us. And so when an FBA needs to be done in the building, we follow a very clear procedure for observations and gathering data, and we do it together, which is great. So it takes some of that ownership just off of me, but also allows a group of people to really participate, and that way, if somebody doesn't like it, it's everybody's fault, not just the psychologist.
That sounds awesome. You know,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if taking on students, I know you mentioned you do some work at night, but does taking on students sort of free you up for more of these administrative type duties?
That's a great question. I would say yes, because I am on a number of committees, and my students certainly share in triennials, and when I have interns, they do initials with me. And I've had my students have also been really involved in the counseling that we do in my school. So it helps me with caseload, which I appreciate. And we certainly understand that, on one hand it's free labor, but on the other hand it's supervised work experience. So we do that together, and I always tell them, I'm grateful for this, and I don't ever expect them to do my job for me. And that, I think, is really important for interns to hopefully understand as well.
That's really nice.
And I'm running low on time, so I'm gonna keep going. Eric, you have a website. Would you mind showing that to us?
Absolutely. I'll do the screen share. Thank you.
No problem. And while you're getting that set up, Carla, I wanted to ask you a question about interview tips. Do you have any interview tips for both sides, prospective supervisors and prospective interns?
Yeah, it's funny. I think the internship tips are probably what most people have heard in terms of tips for anybody who's going on a job interview, in terms of, making sure you're there a little bit early, and make sure, little things that I think sometimes get overlooked. One is making sure that it's hard if you're applying for multiple jobs, but know a little bit about the district. So if there's something in the district that's going on, either an initiative or even, we've had people who have applied and noticed that the website had something called PBIS on it, and that just gives people the sense that you're prepared. The other thing that's, in my mind, the kiss of death, yet I'm so surprised that people routinely do it, is not asking questions at interviews. It's shocking to me, interviews for teachers, school psychologists, administrators, where it's not uncommon when all the questions are done and we turn to that person and we say, do you have any questions for us? Somebody will say, no, I think you've given me all the information I need, I'm pretty good. My feeling is that's not the response I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. Once again, as cliche as it sounds, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. So asking questions about expectations, role, opportunities for professional development, things that you're interested in, will you be able to do those things? I have a practicum student with me now who's interested in doing some research on mindfulness and meditation with kids, and he's been very clear about that. But I think asking good questions that are well thought out, not just kind of generic ones, once again goes back to that whole issue of being prepared. I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's jump back over to Eric then, who, do you want to tell us a little bit about your website and what you've got up there?
Sure. So this is randomactsofcounseling.com, and my goal has been to try to develop some data-based, evidence-based counseling supports, and really try to share those with people so that we're not relegating ourselves to what I call random acts of counseling. So on the site you'll find some behavioral questionnaires that an Excel file that I have that I do I give to teachers to sort of rate the students in terms of what skill they might need or what skills they might be lacking in the classroom as far as social skills and coping skills, and from there, you know, I might meet with the parents and also do some observations, and hopefully that would lead me to having a clear sense of what skills I would want to work on with the student in counseling, so that I'm not just seeing the student randomly. So that's sort of the impetus for the website. You know, because I know as we all get busy, we might see a student here or there, or you know, we might see a student when they're in trouble in the office. But I have about 30 students on my counseling caseload weekly, and many of them have, you know, they're what I call Tier 2 and Tier 3 behavior students, so they have some pretty significant needs. So I really want to dive into working on specific skills with them and focusing on measuring the outcomes of the support. So so on the site, it's just sort of just gotten up and running the last 6 months or so. But my most recent article in the Connecticut School Psychologist is focusing on some skills that we can work on and evidence-based practice in counseling. So hopefully, you know, there are things that I'll share and certainly put them up there for free. So hopefully, you know, we're all in this together to support these kiddos. Hopefully people will find things that are scientific-based and research-based and goal-directed.
Awesome.
Yeah. I want to mention that I'm posting links to Eric's website, Eric's Facebook page, and a link that Carlos shared that looks like a great PDF on preparing for your school psychology internship. I just posted those in the comments section of both Facebook pages.
Excellent, thank you.
So I'm going to jump in with another question. Carlo, the process of choosing a supervisor. I mean, you can ask questions at interview, right?
Yes.
And then there's kind of finding supervision beyond when you're an intern, you know, as an early career school psych. Do you have any tips for finding the right supervisor or picking a supervisor?
Well, it's interesting because I unfortunately I don't think the field lends itself to be kind of like a dating situation where you'd have multiple people to kind of check out and make a decision based on the one who's got your interests. You know, there's no Match.com for internships, unfortunately.
I like that. We should make that, though. We should make
Make it.
You know, what ends up happening is students look for internships, at least in New York, that the first two criteria have almost nothing to do with quality of supervision. It's location and money. Mm-hmm. And so districts that are near where they either are attending college or where they want to work or live are the first criteria. The next, in New York State, I would never get an intern if we don't pay interns. Mm-hmm. So the money is a driving force. I understand that. It's not a lot, you know, $10,000 to $12,000 is probably average. So after you get past the reality that students are going to look for something where they want to be, and that's paying, then they're looking at, well, what schools are offering paid internships, and so then they'll on the other side of it, the people who want to supervise interns, there's certainly criteria. You know, NASP says you should have 3 years of experience and be tenured. In our district, all of our psychologists, almost all, meet the criteria, for being supervised, but not everybody's interested. Because, as Eric was saying before, in as much as it's a wonderful experience, it's a hell of a lot of work. You know, it really is, and it's a wonderful thing to do, but it ends up being a lot of time to supervise and guide and schedule things that are going on. So not everybody is in a place where they're willing to step up to the plate. So who's available in certain districts can be limited. So what it really boils down to, I think, for interns is what schools are offering experiences, paid experiences in New York, near where they want to be, and then they'll go in and they'll interview and see if they can get the job. And then whoever is the intern in that respective district, I think it's kind of like, all right, here you go. You know, unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot of, well, let me make sure this person's interest lines up with my interests and that we're a match. And that's not, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I had wonderful experiences with interns, but it is really kind of like an arranged marriage.
Yeah. How is mentorship different? Have you had people who reach out to you just for mentoring, or and that's a little bit different because there is a choice there. You can just let them know that you're too busy, right?
Well, yeah. In our district, for any new teacher, psychologist, they'll have a mentor for a year officially, and 2 years is recommended. And so my director of special education will often ask me if I will be a mentor for incoming psychologists. And then there's also there's a professor at the local university who's done a really nice job of creating online mentoring.
Oh, wow.
And so talking with graduate students around cases, practices, systems in schools. So that's been kind of cool. It's all virtual.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what we try to do.
Yeah.
Eric, sorry, I cut you off. Oh, I lost.
Okay. Same thing with new psychologists. We assign a mentor, but I was thinking the same thing. You're doing, you know, this is online mentoring in a sense and support. So,
Yes.
and you know, through the Facebook school psych pages, we have a lot of supportive people. You know, someone feels free to ask a question, and so many people jump in with you know, knowledgeable answers and supportive answers, and it's really fantastic. I appreciate all of this.
Yeah, if you can't find someone you trust within your district, you know, the internet is such a great place. The private and public pages are great.
The only thing I will say, and I'm a huge fan of all of the social media and the materials available, it's remarkable. I mean, it literally is like you can get anything about anything.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the day-to-day functioning, I still think folks need, and I'm not talking about just interns or novice psychologists, guidance when it comes to the day-to-day stuff in terms of breaking difficult news to parents, presenting effectively at CSE, you know, really integrating a report well. Those things, it's the nuanced stuff every day that I think we're just kind of doing our own thing. And I would like for someone to say to me, you know, Carlo, at that CSE meeting, you really spent too much time talking about this and not enough time talking about this. Or you got a little too bogged down in jargon. I just have to hope that I'm insightful enough to pick that up because I don't get any feedback in the day-to-day stuff.
That's a good point too. I think of report writing as well. You know, I've been writing my style of reports for who knows how long, and it would be great to get feedback on the utility of my explanations sometimes and recommendations, those kinds of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're running out of time. Do you guys have any final thoughts? Thank you so much. Anything you wanted to share that you haven't gotten to talk about yet, Eric and Carla?
Yeah, I think you're in a great field. I tripped into this whole area of school psychology after thinking I want to be a computer programming major. So, as I think you probably already know, it's incredibly exciting. it's a little overwhelming. There are so many things that we're asked to do. I would kind of go back to a comment I made earlier. Decide on a couple things that you want to be unbelievably competent in, and hone those things. If it's behavior, if it's writing kick-ass FBAs, do that. If it's being an amazing person with cognitive assessments, why you want to do that, I don't know. But if you wanted to be an amazing strengths and weaknesses guru, do that. But I think for a lot of people, we try to do so many things. Get good at a few things.
Yeah, I agree. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Would be, you know, as Carlos said, and I think the previous podcast, you know, it's easy to get overwhelmed. There's so many things to do and so many things to keep track of. Ask for help when you need it. It's not a sign of weakness. It's you know, it might just be what you need to keep it together, because it's a busy field and a lot rests on our shoulders in particular.
Awesome. All right, thank you both for agreeing to come and chat with us. I think it was really informative, and I for sure learned.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, and then I think we're scheduled to be back in February. We'll be posting some stuff as far as what those topics are going to be. We're excited for some upcoming stuff that we think is really interesting. So, okay.
Cool.
Bye, everyone.